Hello students, good morning. I hope you're all doing good. And yesterday we started discussion on philosophy of constitution. And of course we have completed 50% of the discussion. And in today's class we will try to complete the remaining part. So right, come to the discussion. So the philosophy of the constitution means the study of the fundamental nature of the constitution. And of course we tried to define the philosophy of the constitution yesterday, and let me define it again. The philosophy of constitution is the Indian constitution is secular, democratic, liberal, socialistic, and it recognizes the rights of the linguistic and religious minorities, etc. And we discussed the concepts called liberalism and the rights of minorities, etc. in yesterday's class. And today we discuss the remaining concepts called secularism and so on. So let me start with secularism. So what is the meaning of secularism? You know, this word has been the buzzing word in every political landscape, because we as people, we as human beings always show allegiance towards the religion, and we follow different religions. And of course India is known for 6 major religions which are being practiced across the globe. There is great linguistic diversity and religious diversity in India. So therefore to protect the rights of all the religions and to ensure equality among the religions, being secular is very important. So we will discuss what is the meaning of secularism and what should be the condition if a country is not secular. We will look into these aspects before defining the secularism. Let us consider our country, India. In India, every citizen or every community has the right to practice their religion. And of course in India we have churches, temples and mosques, whatnot. Different types or different varieties of religions are promoting their practices and propagating their beliefs. If you take the countries of Middle East like Saudi Arabia and many other Islamic countries, they are not secular, meaning they don't allow other religious groups to practice their religions. And in few European countries, Christianity has been recognized as an official religion. That means in this way there is a single religious domination in many parts of the world. Whereas with respect to India, in India, every religion is celebrated. Every religion is given equal status. So that's why we can proudly say that India is a secular country. I think by now, dear students, you have understood the meaning of secularism. So let me define it. Secularism means treating every religion equal and giving rights for every religion on equal basis. So that is called as a secularism. And in general, secularism means treating religion as only a private matter, and religion is not given public or official recognition, meaning the state will not involve, or the government will not involve in the matters of the religion. That is the meaning of considering religion as a private matter. Okay, right. And as far as the concept of secularism is concerned, there are 2 concepts with respect to secularism. They are Western conception of secularism and Indian conception of secularism. Now we will look into Western conception of secularism. And Western constitutions considers secularism as a mutual exclusion of state and religion. So mutual exclusion of state and religion means both religion and state must stay away from the internal affairs of one another. Other way around, religion will not involve in the matters of the state. What do you mean by matters of the state? Policy making or law making or law implementation or policy implementation, etc. So religion does not involve in the matters of the state, and state does not involve in the matters of the religion. What is the meaning of matters of the religion? Matters of the religion means how to conduct religious affairs and how to promote the religion or how to propagate the religion, etc. So in Western conception, secularism means mutual exclusion of state and religion, or both religion and state must stay away from the internal affairs of one another. So this is the Western conception of secularism. So you may have a question, why the Western countries are promoting this kind of practice? What is that practice? Mutual exclusion of state and religion. So according to the Western conception, if state involves in the religious matters, then state may dictate the religious communities how to conduct the religious affairs, or how to worship, or how to practice the traditions, etc. If the state may do so, then definitely the religious freedoms will be under threat, and there will be domination of one religion over the other if the religion has the support of the state. Therefore, both state and religion does not involve in each other's internal matters. So this is the meaning of mutual exclusion. So in this way, the Western countries are promoting the secularism in their countries. As far as the Indian conception of secularism is concerned, in India, the government interferes in the matters of the religion. And the interference in the sense, the state maintains principled distance with the religions. So you may have a question, what is the meaning of principled distance? So if you look at the general conception of secularism, it is about the absence of involvement of state in the affairs of the religion is called as secularism. But in India, the government or the state involves in the matters of religion, because as we know that India is the land of many religions, and of course few religions are large. That means few religious communities are large compared to other religious communities. And of course we have seen in the past there were domination of one religion over the other, and there was violence based on religion. So by keeping all these things in view, the government involves in the matters of the religion. For example, in Hindu religion, there is a practice called untouchability, and this has been the practice for many years, and this has been followed as a religious custom and tradition. And of course we do know that untouchability is inhuman, and untouchability is unethical and immoral. So in order to prohibit such type of practices like untouchability, the state intervene in the matters of the religion. So such type of intervention or interference of the state is called as negative interference. Why it is called negative interference? Because the intervention of the state is against the religious practices. Okay, that's why it is called as a negative interference or negative interference into the religion. But however, it gives the positive result. The main objective of the government or the state for involving into the religious affairs is to establish equality among the individuals as well as equality among the communities. And the other way of interference into the religious matters is the state provides some financial support for the establishment of educational institutions which belongs to religious minorities. That means through educational institutions they promote their own culture and traditions. For example, madrasas with respect to Muslims, and missionary schools with respect to Christians, and Gurukulas with respect to Hindus. In this way, every religion has its own educational institutions. And under Article 29 and 30, Constitution ensures cultural and educational rights for all the religions. So in this way, the Indian secularism is different from Western model in two ways. One is rights of religious groups, and another one is state's power of intervention. So here rights of religious groups means the Indian Constitution grants rights to all religious groups. That means the right to establish and maintain their educational institutions, and also providing financial support to these religious educational institutions. And in India, freedom of religion means the freedom of religion of both individuals and communities. The freedom of religion of both individuals and communities. That means, on one hand, the Constitution protects the freedom of religion of individuals, and on the other hand, it protects the rights of the religious communities. So in this way, the Constitution tries to ensure the equality among the religious communities as well as the equality between the people who are practicing different religions. And the second thing about the concept of Indian secularism is state's power of intervention. I already discussed how the state intervened in the religious matters to promote liberty, equality, and social justice. Okay, so on the whole, our Constitution upholds the principle of social justice without compromising on individual liberties. In addition, Constitution also upholds group rights or rights of the communities. So I hope you understand the meaning of secularism in Western view as well as in Indian view. So let me summarize it again. So in simple words, secularism means protecting the rights of every religion and treating every religion equal is called as secularism. As far as the Western conception of secularism is concerned, in Western constitutions, they promote the concept called mutual exclusion of state and religion, meaning state does not involve in the matters of the religion and religion does not involve in the matters of the state. So this is called mutual exclusion of state and religion. Whereas in Indian conception, secularism means state interfere or the state maintains principled distance with the religion. So principled distance means whenever the religious practices are against the fundamental rights or against the constitutional values, then the state involves, the state interference, the state interfere in such type of practices and it tries to prohibit the practices which are against the basic human values. And also state government provides some, not only state governments, all the national government and the governments at the state level provide some financial support for the religious institutions which are in minority. Okay, I think you understood the meaning of secularism. Now we will try to understand the meaning of universal franchise. It is also the part of the philosophy of the Constitution. So What is the meaning of franchise? Franchise means right to vote. Universal means right to vote for every individual. So, before going into the topic called universal franchise, I would like to discuss few things about democracy. So basically, a democracy means rule by the people, or democracy means decision making power is given to the individuals. So this is the spirit of democracy. So the spirit of democracy is involving each and every individual in political process, or in the process of law making, or in the process of decision making. Okay, so in order to implement the concept of democracy, we follow different mechanisms. Okay, in India we follow indirect democracy. Indirect democracy means people do not participate directly in the decision making process or directly in law making process. They elect representatives on behalf of them to take decisions or to pass the legislations. So such type of practice is called as indirect democracy. And now, what is the link between this democracy and universal franchise? As I discussed in my earlier lectures, universal franchise is one of the core elements of democracy. Because without universal franchise, we cannot imagine a democratic country or a democratic political setup. Because universal franchise is the legitimate tool, or legitimate mechanism by which the will of the people is expressed. That means by participating in the voting process, the people express their will, or the nation express its will with respect to the election of representatives, or with respect to the election or the formation of the government. So I think you got the point. That means universal franchise is the means to express the will of the nation. Okay, and of course our constitution grants right to vote for every individual who is 18 and above age. So without any discrimination, every individual in India, or every citizen of India, is eligible to vote and is eligible to contest in the elections. So through universal franchise, our constitution ensures the spirit of democracy. Our constitution ensures the implementation of the spirit of democracy. What is the spirit of democracy? It is about involving every individual in political process. So dear students, I think you understood the meaning of universal franchise. Okay. Now we will see the meaning of federalism. So what is the meaning of federalism? See, federalism means dual government. The government at the state level and the government at the national level is called as a federal structure or federal form of government. And of course, we consider United States of America as a mother of federalism. And we always try to, not only we, the countries across the world, they try to compare their federal structure with the federal structure of the United States of America. Okay, because it is the first country which has implemented the federal form of government, or which has adopted the federal structure. That's why it is considered as a mother of federalism. So if we compare our federal structure with the American federalism or American federal structure, there are many differences. Our federal structure is called as quasi-federal or asymmetric federal structure, because in USA the states are independent in many aspects. That means, for example, in India, the residual powers, that means the powers apart from the union list, state list, and concurrent list, are given to the union government. Whereas in USA, this is not the case. The residuary powers or the residual powers are not under the control of the federal government in United States. So this is one of the centralizing tendency. And the next thing is, in USA, all the states are given equal rights. There are no special provisions for any state. Whereas in India, some states like northeastern states under Article 371 has been given some special provisions in comparison with other states of India. And also the northern states like Nagaland and etc., and some hilly states like Uttarakhand has been given special status. So that's why the federal structure of India is asymmetric. It is not symmetric like the federal structure of USA. Now you may have a question: why we have adopted asymmetric federal structure instead of symmetric federal structure? And you do know that India is not India is a diversified country, and India has many regional identities. What is the meaning of regional identity? Regional identity means affection or affinity towards one's region, or love towards one's region is called as a regional identity. So in order to ensure the unity among all the regions, in order to acknowledge and recognize the diversity at a regional level, and for administrative convenience, we have adopted a federal structure. And in India, the needs of the regions varies from one region to another region. So in order to satisfy all these things, we have adopted a asymmetric federal structure. If you look at the cultures, customs and traditions of northeastern states, they are entirely different from the other states of our country. That means there are specific needs for each and every state. Therefore, our constitution has recognized the needs of every region and has provided some provisions to protect their culture and traditions. Example, Article 371, which gives some special rights or special privileges for northeastern states, etc. Okay, so that's why we have adopted a asymmetrical federal structure instead of symmetrical federal structure, right? And the next thing is national identity. What is the meaning of national identity? National identity means it is the feeling of one nation. It is the feeling of one community. So how the Constitution has ensured the national identity? So as we discussed a few minutes back, we have adopted federal structure to recognize the rights and interests of each and every region of India. And we modified that federal structure as asymmetric to reach that expectation of recognizing the rights of each and every region of India. Yes or no? So here, such type of practice of recognizing the regional identities, we have created a national identity. I think you got the point. That means all the regional identities in India have become complementary to the national identity. That means each and every citizen or each and every region of India has the reason to follow the constitution. So in this way, the constitution has tried to balance the various regional identities as well as try to ensure the national identity. So what are the provisions in the constitution which ensure the national identity? They are federal structure, and we know that separate electorates based on religion were introduced by the Minto-Morley reforms 1909 and Montague-Chelmsford reforms 1919. So these separate electorates based on the religion had become a threat to the national identity and unity of the nation. Therefore, separate electorates based on religion had been rejected. Okay, students, had been rejected. So in this way, our constitution has ensured the national identity, or the constitution has ensured the unity of the nation. Okay. So on the whole, the main objective was to evolve one community. Evolve one community, right? Now, we will discuss the criticisms with respect to our constitution. In brief, of course, our constitution can be subjected to many criticisms. In brief, the three major criticisms of the constitution are our constitution is unwieldy, and our constitution is unrepresentative, and our constitution is alien to our conditions. So now we will try to understand why these criticisms have been made on the constitution. So one criticism is unwieldy. Unwieldy means very large or difficult to move, is called as unwieldy. Why our constitution is called as a lengthiest constitution or voluminous constitution? If we compare the Indian constitution with other constitutions of different parts of the world, the Indian constitution is very comprehensive. Comprehensive means each and every organ of the government or each and every constitutional body has been given a detailed functions and detailed operations, etc. If you take election commission, each and every aspect of the election is clearly mentioned, and each and every function of the election commission is clearly mentioned under part 15 of the Indian constitution. In this way, each and every constitutional body, its functions has been elaborated in a comprehensive manner. So because of that, our Indian constitution has become voluminous, has become lengthiest. Okay, so therefore this criticism can be overthrown. This criticism, unwieldiness of the constitution, can be rejected based on this argument. Okay, and the next criticism is our Indian constitution is unrepresentative. Why this criticism has been made? Why the Indian constitution is considered as an unrepresentative? As we know that the Constituent Assembly was formed to frame the constitution for India. And of course, the members of the Constituent Assembly were not elected through universal suffrage or universal adult franchise. So that's why our Indian constitution is criticized as unrepresentative. However, if you look at the Constituent Assembly, the members of the Constituent Assembly are from different regions of India. And of course, Indian National Congress used to represent all colors of India, all ideologies which are there in India. Okay, so therefore this criticism can be ruled out. that is, Indian constitution is unrepresentative. This criticism can be ruled out. Okay, and the next major criticism is it is alien to our conditions. Why the constitution is criticized as alien to our conditions? Their argument was the people who framed the constitution belonged to those times, the times of 20th century. Right now we are in 21st century. And of course, the conditions during that period were entirely different compared to the current conditions. As we know that the lawmaking is influenced by the current conditions. So that's why our constitution is criticized as alien to our conditions. However, we can make a counter statement for this criticism. A valuable and rational and logical comment we can make against this criticism, which is alien to our conditions. Yes, I do agree that the needs of the society changes from one time to another time. However, our constitution has different mechanisms to adopt the changes that are taking place in the society. And also the objectives or the ideals in which our founding fathers believe in, they are universal. They are universal and they are acceptable by everyone. And of course, they can be achieved only through hard work from one generation to another generation. And their ideals have a lot of vision. Okay, so we cannot say that their ideals doesn't carry any vision. For example, our founding fathers believed in objectives like secularism, socialism, egalitarian society, fundamental rights, etc. All these things are everlasting. These objectives are everlasting objectives. Okay, therefore this criticism can be ruled out. Okay, right. Now we will discuss the limitations of the constitution. What is the meaning of limitations? Limitations means limits of the functioning of the constitution, or limits to the application of the constitution. So the major limitations of the constitution are the socio-economic rights are not mentioned in the fundamental rights. Instead, they are mentioned in the directive principles of the state policy. As we know that fundamental rights are justiciable in nature, meaning we can move the courts to implement the fundamental rights. And this provision hasn't been given to the directive principles of state policy. We have discussed briefly about directive principles of state policy in our previous lectures. If you have any doubts, please watch them again. Okay, right. So for example, one of the socio-economic rights in DPSP, directive principles of the state policy, is equal work or equal pay for equal work. That means men and women should be given same amount of money for same work. Okay, this right should have been made as a fundamental right. Okay, and prohibition of alcohol consumption is one of the rights in the DPSP, and distribution of resources equally and equitably among the citizens. This is another right regarding socio-economic development under DPSP. Are you following, students? So in this way, many rights are socio-economic rights are mentioned under the DPSP instead fundamental rights. Okay, if DPSP had been given judicial, or justiciable nature, then definitely these rights would have been implemented. So this is one of the major limitations. And the next limitation is Indian Constitution has a centralized idea of national unity. What is the meaning of this centralized idea of national unity? If you look at the structure of the Indian Constitution, the conceptual structure, there are some unitary tendencies, there are some unitary provisions to the, there are some unitary provisions which are attached to the central government. They are emergency provisions under Article 352, 356, 360, and the central government can make laws in the concurrent list which are applicable to the states as well. If states makes the laws, if the states make the laws on the same subject in the concurrent list, if those laws come into conflict with the central laws, then they are considered as null and void. So in this manner, the central government has been given more powers compared to the state governments. So this is the meaning of centralized idea of national unity. You may have a question, how these provisions are related to centralized idea of national unity. The main objective behind giving more powers to the central government is to ensure unity and integrity of the nation. Meaning, through these provisions, the Constitution is empowering the central government to ensure national unity. That's why this is called as a centralized idea of national unity. And the next limitation is Constitution appears to have glossed over some important issues of gender justice, particularly within the family. Meaning, there are no provisions in the Constitution to ensure gender justice at family level. Okay? So, these are the various limitations of the Constitution of India. So, dear students, with this we have completed the philosophy of the Constitution. Till now, we have discussed these concepts from philosophy of the Indian Constitution, one of the chapters of the Indian Constitution at work. And of course, in our future classes, we will discuss more things about the philosophy of the Indian Constitution from Lakshmikant. Sooner or later, we are going to start a series of lectures on Lakshmikant, and I will try to complete all the chapters from Lakshmikant. Okay? So meanwhile, please go through the discussions which are made on the NCERTs. Okay? Thank you very much.